Welcome to the first of 6 webinars that will focus on effective mathematics teaching. My name's Tracy Hughes-Butters and I'll be leading you through each of the webinars, which have all been designed to aid the improvement of mathematics teaching and learning in your schools. So webinar 1 has been designed primarily for leaders of schools. The learning intention and success criteria are presented on this slide. Please note that the final dot point refers to the scope and sequence or year plan for the year or stage level. Well, from the PatMaths data, 5 areas of concern for our students in Catholic schools throughout Australia has been highlighted. Please note that they are not in any order. Pause the video here and discuss the data findings. What do you notice? What do you wonder? Do the 5 major areas of concern mirror your students' results? Please pause. Before we begin with the tips, let's consider the impact of student learning through the lack of understanding of the various concept areas listed. Firstly, not understanding number and place value. Well, if students struggle with the concepts in these areas, then the impact on other concept areas is immense. It truly is the basis of mathematical understanding. And as you can see from the infographic, number and place value are integral to the understanding of decimals and fractions. Students often struggle with fractions because they have not developed an automaticity with multiplication and division facts. Decimals are dependent on students having procedural fluency with place value. Get the idea? They're just some of the areas. Place value and decimals are necessary for the decoding of units of measurement. Comparing, ordering, and the understanding of the various concepts of place value are just some of the prereq knowledge students need to appropriately use units of measurement. To extend and create number patterns, students need a deep understanding of place value, decimals, and fractions. Baseline readiness for algebra is the integration of the 4 operations through fractions and decimals and the number facts. Now, this is going to support the simplification of variable expressions using the order of operations and solving variable equations using the inverse order of operations. Fractions, decimals, and place value, the 3 essential elements of algebra readiness. Now, the 4 areas on the left are vital for data representation and interpretation. Now, if we want our students to be able to correctly read the vertical scale of a line graph, well, they must understand place value and decimals. Patterning will aid observation of patterns in the data. And how can a line or a column graph be created if units of linear measurement are not understood? These are just some of the examples of the connections between these areas. Well, why a deliberate focus on leaders of schools? Well, if change is not led and championed by the leaders, it's not going to be valued. This is the fundamental work that good leaders do. They support their teachers to ensure the improvement of student outcomes through effective learning experiences. Being equipped with the content knowledge, the structure and methods for teaching mathematics empowers teachers to be the primary source of instruction, not a textbook or a slideshow, says I. Well, the following are 2 successful tips that leaders have implemented and have affected change in schools. So what can you do? Well, instead of jumping to some, quick fix process on each of those previous mathematical areas, let's actually consider 2 quite powerful and proven tips that have affected change in schools. I've seen the work and I've seen the results of these schools. It works. I will present 2 successful strategies that you, as leaders, can facilitate with your staff. 1, ensuring that your teachers all work in the mathematics space with this adage, begin with the end in mind. In other words, teachers actually understand the breadth and the depth of the whole curriculum or syllabus. And 2, we build on solid foundations, designing and using scope and sequences for the year or the stage level, where the learning is sequential and it builds on prior learning. Time is actually given to developing fluency, application, and manipulation, not just rote learning. Now, I will share examples from schools who have had success in mathematics due to their relentless focus and work. This has been driven by the principal and school leaders to build effective mathematics teaching and learning. Now, the third strategy will be the focus for the following webinars, and they are designed for teachers. Here's a very simple but very effective professional learning activity that you can facilitate with all your staff in under an hour. It's called What's in the Syllabus, and it applies a backward mapping process and gallery walk. Now, it is imperative that you do this activity with all your teaching staff. Well, process, select one topic. Take fractions rather than doing a strand-like number, which is huge. Let's keep it achievable. You'll need hard copies of the topic from Kinder to Year 8. If you're able, have a secondary teacher at the meeting so they can actually break down the Year 7 and 8 content. Mount the content for each year or stage level on the wall in consecutive order. Now, teachers move to their year or stage level content and they consider two areas. One, what is the prerequisite knowledge your kids need to come to your classroom for you to successfully teach the content of this topic, listed on the left-hand side of the content. Two, what do you consider are the essential mathematical skills and content in this topic that your students must know by the end of the year? Now highlight them. Now give the team some time to work on the activity. Now here's the power of it. As a whole staff, everybody together, with the leaders facilitating, start with the highest year level and together look at what has been posted on the wall. Ask your teachers for that year or stage level to actually explain the prereqs that they need to teach the content effectively. Ask them to explain the content they highlighted. Leaders should be prompting the discussion. Use I wonder and I notice to promote the discussion. Here are some examples from schools that have worked through the process. Now, you will glean some very valuable information during the activity. Misunderstandings will reveal themselves, especially the content that some teachers will consider essential, or the realization that they're actually teaching content that's not even part of their curriculum. But they've always taught it. And don't be surprised, it happens more often than you think. Tip number 2. You want to build the learning on a solid foundation. Now, once we know what the big picture is, what the whole thing is, we need to chunk it down. So now we're working in year or stage levels according to your school's context. And as the analogy says on the slide, if you don't have good foundations, cracks begin to appear and the whole thing collapses. Well, it's the same as mathematics teaching. Well, it's like the adage, don't sweat on the small stuff. If teachers are too focused on the activities before ensuring that the scope and sequence is an effective guide for the year, then your students will lose out through isolated learning experiences that have little or even no relevance or connection. Your teaching team should first work collaboratively on designing a really solid scope and sequence. Then consider the programs. Now, this should be really completed before the teaching year so that your teachers get to spend their prep time during the year selecting appropriate activities from the teaching program based on the assessment for learning. Programs need not be rewritten every year. Ensure they're differentiated on the required content. Then it is a matter of updating the document as needed and then printing it off and the teachers selecting the activities that are best for their students and using it appropriately. Well, pause the video here and discuss how the scope and sequence in your schools would ensure that learning is sequential and builds on the prior learning. Here's an example of a scope and sequence designed for years 3 and 4. Note that the year does not commence with number. With all the interruptions and the craziness of the first 2 weeks, why would you start the year with such a crucial topic? So we went to the syllabus or the curriculum and we considered the content of the topics until we found data. It has minimal content with very few prereq topics for the year. And it was quite successful as we used it as a getting to know you approach. Now, notice how topics have been placed to ensure that students build on their learning. Consider length. The prereq learning that will be revisited and applied in that topic will be whole number, 2D shapes, and fractions and decimals. Ensure that students are experiencing their learning with a sustained format, not a Monday is number, Tuesday is geometry, etc., etc. Have a chunk of time to build a deep understanding. Also notice that subtraction and addition have 2 chunks of time. This is to stop the issue of trying to teach both addition and subtraction together. Subtraction is always the loser here due to running out of time. Same thing happens with poor old division. So let's give each concept a dedicated chunk of time. Of course, the connection for addition and subtraction will be built into the second chunk, and students will spend some time playing with addition again in the subtraction topic. Same with multiplication and division. The vital point is this is a flexible document. Teachers will know when to move on according to their assessment. Sometimes the students will fly through the work, other times they will need more time, and teachers should adapt the scope and sequence according to the students' learning needs. So pause the video here and discuss how your teachers are currently adapting the scope and sequence to support the needs of their students. Tip number 2, building learning on a solid foundation. Now, how can you develop this with your staff? Well, this is a very simple but powerful professional learning activity that you can complete with each teaching team before the start of the year. I would suggest when you do this activity, it's critical that your leader of pedagogy or your curriculum person work with the team. Okay, first of all, make a hard copy and cut out the content for the year. Use your data to direct the content, as there may be year levels that need to revise the previous year's content or part of it. Put it in the scope and sequence. Glue the content for the topic, if necessary, into a strip. Now, this is quite powerful as it gives a visual representation of the amount of content in the topic. Consider the prereq learning for each topic and order the topics accordingly. This is where the discussion really ramps up. Decide on an approximate amount of time for each topic and write that on the content. Now, on the wall, label the 4 terms and their weeks. Add any interruptions to the wall. Decide on the first topic for the year and then start placing the topics, discussing the pros and cons of the placement. Now, when the team is finished, bring someone from the leadership team in. The team will explain their scope and sequence. It's very powerful stuff. There will be many changes and quite serious discussions. You can see the work done by the Stage 2 team at St Joseph's Tenterfield. They have laid out the content for the year on a table and then they have put it onto the wall. Their leader of pedagogy, Jack Waite, is in the second image, has come into the session at a later stage and seen here discussing the scope and sequence with the team. Here's another example. The teachers have taken their scope and sequence from the wall and they've transferred it onto butcher's paper. They wanted to keep it in a hard copy. You can see in the images how they've dissected the content, and at other times they've taped content together and they have annotated the prereq learning. Now, the power of this activity is that all members of the team have contributed to the final document and they now all have a deep understanding of the content they are about to teach, where they will build on prior learning and the reasoning of the structure of the scope and sequence. So, did we hit the mark? Well, here's the success criteria for webinar 1. Discuss them with your team. Look, employ the 2 activities to build capacity with your staff. Thank you for joining me today. Remember that there are 5 more webinars available. Their target audience will be teachers, and they will focus on building capacity on each of those areas of concern drawn from the PAT Maths data. Thank you very much.